Yeah, it makes sense. Is there a potential that, I guess, if we look back at 2008, post that, you know, post the crash, it seemed like there was sort of a new economy, or it was a new way to look at how the economy works with QE, etc. Do you think there's something similar maybe that's occurred over the past few years, where maybe some of our other indicators, as you said, aren't showing exactly what's happening in the economy?
Look, the economy is always evolving. So, I don't think that is any different than all the talk about some new economy after we get out of the real estate mess in the early to mid 80s. Is it different than coming out of the tech wreck and mopping up all that excess capacity back in the early to mid 2000s, post great financial crisis? Of course, different sort of economy. It's always changing. So that argument doesn't impress me so much. What we have to try and grapple with is, why do we have such a big divide, especially in the national accounts? Production in the past year is flat. I don't know what sort of new economy that is, and that's even with the AI craze. Flat industrial production, and we have flat gross domestic income in real terms. People don't realize that profits in real terms, adjusted for inflation, are flat to negative. So flat production, flat real income, but real GDP over 3%, which is astounding. And that's the number everybody looks at, is GDP. What's GDP? GDP is spending. And I guess because we're just all a nation of narcissists, that we just focus on the spending side to gauge the economic health of the country. But production is flat on a 12-month basis, not a 1-month basis, not a 2 or 3 month. Over the past 12 months, production is flat. Real domestic income is flat, but real GDP is up over 3%. And the question is why? What's the difference? Well, the difference is this: production and income are not leveraged. GDP is spending, and that can be leveraged. And that's really what happened last year. Last year, in terms of explaining why GDP was so strong, came down to three things. We had the last leg of the excess savings file from the Biden stimulus checks that were mailed out to everybody, as long as you had a pulse, back in the winter of 2021. That was a gift that kept on giving. That was a $2 trillion gift that couldn't possibly be spent all at once. That had a lingering impact right through into last year. And then we had a credit card boom of virtually unprecedented proportions. It was astounding that you would have had double-digit growth in credit card balances at a time when interest rates on these things were well in excess of 20%. And now we're paying the piper, because you see that the delinquency rates on credit cards have gone up to the highest level since 2012, when the unemployment rate was 8%, not 3.9%. Very interesting. Massive credit card boom. The last leg of the excess savings drawdown, which frankly I wasn't expecting, because the research shows that when households in America are confronted with a stimulus check in the past, they used to spend half and save half, but didn't get saved. It all got spent. I did not think we'd finish the year with the savings rate flirting with around 3.5%. It's less than half the pre-COVID norm, but we become a nation of where acronyms are like YOLO. YOLO, you only live once. YOLO to Main Street is what FOMO is to Wall Street. And then the really big one was the expansion of fiscal policy. I mean, here we had the unemployment rate below 4%, and the government expanded the deficit by 25% last year. That is unheard of. But when you look at the fiscal expansion last year, both directly and indirectly, so indirectly, I'm referring to the multiplier impacts on the fiscal expansion, that accounted for 2/3 of that 3% GDP growth last year. And the other third came from the drawdown of the excess savings in the household sector and the spending associated with the credit card boom. So outside of these three developments, actually, GDP growth was flat. in line with production, in line with income. And people might say, well, that's data mining. I prefer to call it analysis, but only point it out because if I was an equity analyst and I was writing this up like a company report, I'd put an asterisk and I'd say at the bottom of the page, these are non-recurring items. Credit card rejection rates have gone up to near record highs. People are applying for fewer credit cards. And because the misery right now of having your FICO score affected by the fact that delinquency rates on credit cards have gone up to 12-year highs. And the excess savings file is now in the rearview mirror. And as far as fiscal policy is concerned, all we're doing is running fiscal policy right now on a set of continuing resolutions. There is no more fiscal stimulus until possibly after the November election. So you're just taking away the crutches that supported GDP growth last year that gave you collectively 3 percentage points of growth. All the growth last year in GDP came from these sources, and they're not in existence anymore. And then you're searching for, well, what is the catalyst that's going to cause a reacceleration of the economy? I frankly can't really find one. And we could talk about the AI craze, but that's really a secular development. The explosion of dot-coms and the internet and the World Wide Web didn't stop the economy from going into recession back in 2000, 2001. That's a secular shift in productivity, but not enough to stop the economy from embarking on an outright recession, which, by the way, I think is starting right now. I don't, my intention here is not to scare anybody. This is not a medical diagnosis. Recessions are part of the business cycle. It just so happens that nobody really likes to talk about them. And at the first opportunity, like you saw last year, economists will throw in the towel on the recession call when it doesn't happen, just like they did in 2000 and like they did in 2007. But delayed is not the same as derailed. And there were some leverage-related factors that kept GDP growth alive and well last year. But there's other components of the economy, like I said before, that are not ratifying that 3% GDP growth. And now the GDP growth is going to start, and it's already starting. It's going to start to revert to where that trend, that flat trend in real income and industrial production are right now.